All right, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us once again for our YouTube Live Genealogy Q&A with D. Joshua Taylor and Susan R. Miller. Josh is the NYGMB president, and Sue is the director of programming and outreach. And we are here to answer your submitted questions today. So we will get to as many as we can. If you do have any additional questions, feel free to leave them in the chat box. If we have time, we'll get to them, but we have a lot of really good questions, so let's jump right in. Thanks, Josh and Sue, for joining us. And so before we started, this is the last YouTube Live of the year. We've done probably 4 or 5 throughout 2017. And thank you if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We'll continue into 2018. If you've been in the past, thanks for your support. But we have been doing a lot of stuff in 2018. So as we answer questions, I'm sorry, 2017.
They're gonna have yourself.
Yeah, we're in 2018 already. So as we ask the questions, each of us will kind of share, what we've been up to in 2017. And so I just wanted to start with Josh. What has 2017 held for the NYGMB? From your perspective.
Yeah, well, we've done a lot this year. I don't want to steal anybody's project we're working on, but I think one of the first things we did, and probably one of the most noticeable, is we did a rebrand of the organization. So we put out a new logo and we redid the pages of the researcher, and we'll let Fred talk about the website because he was very much involved in that. But we gave the GMB sort of a look for the next couple of years as we walk into our 150th anniversary in 2019. And that was exciting to hear so many positive comments on our tagline of "What's your New York story?" And I love people coming up and telling us their New York stories. It was great.
All right, great, thanks. Okay, so our first question is about a beginner in research. I'm just beginning my research and I want to start off with all the right methods. I've read in many places that one should use a research log, but it seems like it can be a pain to fill out constantly. So is it really worth it, is the question about a research log.
You want me to start?
Well, I'm sure we both have very strong opinions on this, so go ahead, Sue.
Well, I will say for years I did not use a research log. And I would go and do a search over again and go, I did that already. And it took a lot of trial and error for me to start to realize how valuable it is. So that was my lesson to me.
Yeah, and I will say it seems like a tedious task, to put together a research log. But for me, I eventually started doing my research plans and my research to-do lists, and that became my research log. So it wasn't this task I did after I researched. I actually had everything almost already done. And I found the benefit for me is when I'm trying to prove something isn't true, and I have everything I've looked at, it's helpful to know everything you've looked at. If not, you can't actually say that you've done that exhaustive type of research that you have to do.
And you're right. And when people call in here and are asking about doing a consultation for their research or for our research services, one of the things I am asking them is, have you done a research log? Can you let us know all the places you have already looked? And if you don't have that, it's all up here in your brain, but you're not communicating it with others as well. So if you are looking for someone to assist you, whether it's a professional or just a friend, having that research log is very important for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and negative searches.
Yes.
Put down what you didn't find, as you were saying.
Yep. Everything you don't know about your ancestors. That might tell you something about them.
Yeah, and just to add to that personally, it was something I was skeptical of doing when I first started, but I did, and as someone who struggles to find time to do my genealogy and my research, it is amazing to just go back into the log, pick up right where I left off. I don't need to rack my brain or anything. So, that's, I think, another. Okay, so our second question, what is the best genealogy gift that you have ever received? And do you have any good ideas for this holiday season?
Sue, you want to?
Go ahead. You go ahead and start.
So the best gift I received, actually, my grandmother used to give me $20 bills every Christmas to use for copies. And it was sort of this thing that I loved to get every single Christmas. And to me, that was the best gift because it allowed me to go to a repository and bring copies home, which, back in the day, right? that was a real good thing. But I think, nowadays, the best gift that I receive is sort of life memberships and societies and organizations, because it allows me to be a part of that organization forever.
That's one I've received for my birthday, actually, rather than holidays. So, and of course, things like research guides, the books and publications or subscriptions for something so that you can continue your research, guides and methodology, DNA kits.
Yep.
And one thing that helps too for those of us who are trying to preserve the family memories and stories is the archival products.
Absolutely.
Things that you can take apart, that photo album that's really getting a little acid eaten, and being able to preserve the photographs better so that they're scanning them and keeping them for future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pictures do tell stories.
Yes. Yes, they do.
All right, so our next question, I'm trying to find out if my ancestor, born in 1712 in Ireland, died in 1786 in Quebec. So trying to find out if this ancestor was a loyalist. So what are some loyalist-related sources, and how would you go about discovering if that was your ancestor?
A lot of loyalist sources. So there's any of the loyalist claim files. So the National Archives in the UK, series AO12 and AO13, they've been digitized now by Ancestry. Takes a little bit to find them, so go to the card catalog and then select loyalist claims.
Loves the card catalog.
But that is one sort of resource to search. There's also published books out there about loyalists that will list those who are noted to be loyalists within a specific region. So a couple of answers out there.
Okay, great.
Definitely had the loyalist claims and search.
Yeah, we had a number of loyalist questions actually, so that's definitely good to get started with. So before our next question, Sue, would you like to tell us about the programs and events in 2017?
We had quite a full year in 2017. I brought my little list so that I wouldn't forget anything. We had a couple of research tours. We reinstituted the New York City research tour, which had not happened with the New York G&B for a few years. We had a great group of people and did a lot of hand-holding in that tour and took them to the New York Public Library, as well as municipal archives, historical societies, some other places, Center for Jewish History. We also had our annual Albany tour. So those are great trips to come on. We had a number of different seminars and workshops. We had a writing workshop with Dr. Tom Jones, who is a CG, certified genealogist, as well as a whole string of honorifics. And he did this Write It Up workshop, which was a fabulous event. We had a DNA workshop with Blaine Bettinger, Dr. Blaine Bettinger, and Angie Bush, two of the top genealogists in the genetic genealogists, I should say, in the country. As well as we had a wonderful Western New York genealogy conference up in Buffalo, jointly with the Western New York Genealogy Society, and that was almost 200 people coming from all over the state, from Canada, Western New York, Ohio, other places. We've had a lot of webinars as well as these YouTube Lives. So don't forget, members, that those are recorded for you on the website. And
that's a lot. I was going to say that keeps us busy.
Yes,
I was trying to think of what my favorite one was this year, and they all had something wonderful about each one of them.
And I'm sure we'll give a preview for 2018, but don't forget New York G&B Week is coming up in January.
Yep.
And you'll get a kind of an overview of the year as well in January.
So, all right, great. Thanks, Sue.
We've been busy.
Okay, so our next question. What do you do when a death certificate says the name of the cemetery, but the individual can't be found by the cemetery? Also, if a death notice in the newspaper says that someone is in a cemetery, but again, they're not in that cemetery when looked for, what do you do?
I think we've all had that.
Yeah, yep.
A lot of times it depends on when they were interred at the cemetery. If it was early on, one of the questions to ask the cemetery staff is, do they have records from those years? Because, books may have been damaged or destroyed, and they may not simply have the records anymore. And it doesn't mean the person is not interred in the cemetery. but they just may not have a written record anymore.
Yeah, and then that's, I mean, the headstone isn't, of course, the only record that someone's buried in a cemetery. And so going to those original records can be key. They don't exist, then you might have only the certificate itself to go on.
Right.
When I had one case I was working on for my own family this summer, and the death certificate said one thing, we got to the cemetery and they said, nope, that person's not here. But you might want to try another cemetery because they had been interred elsewhere afterwards, about 30 or 40 years after their death. And so that's, you know, all that, those types of things happen.
Right, and especially those early records, a reinterment, they may not have a record anymore of that. And the headstones can disappear too.
Absolutely.
One of our friends went to a cemetery and tried to get a photograph of the headstone for me that's no longer there. So, disappeared.
Great, thanks. So our next question is about baptism and birth records. I'm looking for some baptism records to substitute for a birth certificate because my ancestor was born around 1800. But I don't know what denomination my ancestor was. What are some of the ways I might figure that out?
All right, this is a good question.
Yep. And actually, our genealogist in residence took a look at that question, and she had a suggestion.
All right. So what did Meryl say?
And so Meryl's suggestion was also to check siblings. If you can find the siblings and see what religion those siblings may have been, or their children. You know, religion often follows in the family, not always, but it's the first place to look. And you can also check the county histories or gazetteers for that time period. The New York Family History Research Guide and Gazetteer has a list of gazetteers for different time periods. And oftentimes they will list denominations that had that church in the town at that time. So that may give you a clue.
Yeah, and it's a lot of, you know, this is why research logs are important, right? Because you want to list all the different denominations you're searching for, you find the one that the family appears to have some affiliation with. And it's also important to note that not all religions would have baptismal records that they kept, or even have, you know, records that could be substituted as a birth record.
Right. And actually, I think, Josh, when we were discussing this, you were saying, too, that you should be careful that early on with baptisms as replacements for birth certificates. And why is that?
Yeah, well, just I mean, some religious groups believe in sort of adult baptism, and so a record that is full of baptisms, you can't assume that person is an infant or at a certain age. They could be any age, and some churches that believe in adult baptism don't even keep baptismal records. So it's a lot of analysis there.
And oftentimes, you know, a whole series of siblings could be baptized at the same time as well.
Yes.
And hopefully you're not looking for just that one person, but again, siblings and parents and cousins and
All
everything
come
else.
at once. Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thanks. Okay, so our next question is a little holiday season focused. So I'm going to be around a lot of my elder relatives this holiday season, and I'd like to capture as much information about their lives, you know, both, you know, interesting stories, but also material that we could use in our genealogy. So what are some good questions to ask, you know, those relatives to kind of generate that information?
You want to give a few? I mean, I have.
Why don't you start?
Well, I'm gonna say I usually around the holidays I always center my questions around food, which might seem funny, but food is one of the senses, right? You smell food, you taste food, and so if someone can't say, well, where did you go to school? What was lunch like when you went to school? Or, you know, do you remember a meal that your mother would have made for you when you came home from school? And that sometimes triggers a conversation about school that you might not get the best answer if you just sort of pin them down and say, what was the first year you went to school? So I always ask questions about food and games as well, things they used to do that they might remember.
Right. That's a good point. And if you can remember, turn the recorder on your phone.
I was just going to say.
I completely forgot that this weekend when I was with my mom and my aunt. But yes, and pictures as well can be good joggers of the memory. And, you know, if you see a picture of someone, can you tell me about any time you spent? Did you ever go on a trip with that person? Or what did you do in the summer? You know, summer memories, you know, what was the best summer memory that you have? You know, and you never know what you find in the family papers too that can jog a memory.
Yeah.
So.
Great, thanks. Okay, so I guess actually before we move on, we have a handful of questions left, but just wanted to share from sort of my end as the digital services manager, which is my role here, what we've been up to this year. So yeah, as many of you know, we launched sort of a refresh of our website this past May. So it has a different look and feel than before. We've organized our resources a little differently and done some things that will hopefully help our members and the general public kind of discover what we have available. I can tell you personally, the challenge, it was an amazing challenge in a good way because there is so much information on our website. And it's difficult to organize and to make, findable, but I think, our team did a good job, and I definitely encourage everyone to just explore. There are lots of things to find, especially for our members with our webinars and knowledge base and things like that.
And Fred, I'd love to jump in for a minute because I think one of the things you did a fabulous job in is the knowledge base articles and putting the filters on those. So if you have a particular subject or a particular county that you want to research, you can turn on those filters and find the knowledge base articles just for those. And that is a great tool. I use that continually. So, and that way I can get right to the article I'm looking for. And I have a little more knowledge about which articles are on the knowledge base, but for those people who aren't as familiar, it's a fabulous way to search through the content on the website.
Yeah, and to do a quick overview, there are really useful drop-down menus, and that'll show you everything, that we have things on. So, definitely explore that. And aside from the website, we have continued to make, improvements to the e-library to make, certain collections easier to search and easier to find. And then we have also digitized some more records. We have digitization days ongoing here. We're doing some things that we hope to bring online for the first time ever in 2018. But in 2017, we, added a large number of images to our New York State religious records collection, as well as images of the New York State Death Index and some really interesting newspaper marriage announcements from the mid-1800s that were a really nice set of transcriptions. So definitely check those out if you haven't had a chance yet, especially the religious records collection. We have a very nice table at the bottom of the page that tells you exactly what denominations, what counties, and what congregations are available. So yeah, if you have a chance, definitely look at those as well. Okay. So back to our questions here. Here's a good one. So how can the record help me in my research? And then maybe just, for those of the audience that don't know, what is the record very briefly?
All right, give the,
Yes.
tell people what the record is.
The record is our peer-reviewed quarterly journal. So we've just finished up year 148, and the articles are compiled genealogies. There are some record transcriptions. The articles can be problem-solving in nature. And one of the most useful things I find is trying to watch for the methodology that the author has used to prove whatever the family linkages are. And some people say they read the footnotes first. Sorry, I read the article first, and then I go back, or at least a section of the article, and then I go back and read the footnotes to see how they constructed that section and that linkage. So.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. I mean, the article might not be about the family that you're connected to, but the process for that county or that place is very, very similar. And so finding out records are there, how did they analyze certain things, is a really good tool.
And quite frankly, reading those footnotes to help you strengthen your own citations.
Yes.
That's one, again, I have to continually work on writing my citations. And again, like the research log, I finally learned, after a few years of not doing it as well, how to really do a better job on footnotes.
Yeah, and there's also, you can get help just by looking at the writing style. How do you construct a logical argument as a genealogist, right? Sometimes you wonder, do I have enough? Am I done researching? Well, read record articles, and you get a sense of when you might be done, when you might be ready to write something up. And if you think you are, write it up and submit it to the record.
Right. Yep. Always looking for good content for the record.
Yeah. And yeah, personally, I can say just, simply the transcriptions of records, that again have been done for 148 years. These are transcriptions of records that have been destroyed, are totally inaccessible, nowhere else online. So that is good too.
And that's the one place I've actually found one of my own family members in the record is in a transcription. Yep.
Great. Yeah. Okay, so our next question is about SoundX. And so the question is, I keep hearing about SoundX. What is SoundX and what can I use it for?
I used to have I used to have the code memorized. I don't think I can do it from scratch anymore. But SoundX is a system that was invented to help index records on sort of a phonetic basis. So the idea is that if the enumerator spelled a name wrong on a census, it wouldn't matter because you'd be able to find it in the index. Of course, we've advanced beyond SoundX in a lot of ways, but you still have the option to turn on SoundX searches on a lot of websites.
That is more important just now for people who are not familiar with the New York State death index.
Yes, absolutely.
Because certain years are coded by
with
and grouped by SoundX, not just an alphabetical index.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
But it's easy to quickly Google it and put in a name and it'll give you the SoundX code.
Yep.
So,
great, yes. Okay, so our next question is about state censuses. What kind of state censuses are available for New York, and what kind of information do they hold compared to the federal census?
Right. I was going to say Sue's going to go for the book. I was going to go for the book because there's a chapter all about censuses. But this is the new book. This is the very first copy of part one, actually, that just came off the press a couple days ago.
Yes, the reprint.
So this is the revised edition of the New York Family History Research Guide and Gazetteer, which has a great chapter that covers state census records.
It does, and it has a really nice chart. I know you probably can't see this on the YouTube, but it's a chart that lists each of the counties and all of the years that state censuses were taken, if the county existed, whether there are records or no existing records. And then there are notes to go to certain county guides for details. So this is the place I always go to figure out, does a state census exist for that county for that time period? But they start back in 1825 and go through not every single 10 years on the 5, but up through 1925. There's no 1885 or 1895. Instead, there's an 1892. But one of the really nice things about the New York State Census in 1855, is they were doing every name and relationships on them, which is...
And in some years, you even get the length of residence in a particular county, which can be really, really important when you're tracing migration.
Right.
So yeah, they're great resources.
They really are. Yeah.
Great.
Not always the same questions as the federal census too.
Yeah, it can differ.
Right.
Yeah. So worth investigating.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. Great. So a couple additional questions we just received yesterday. So where are the best places to find birth, marriage, and death records for New York City between 1800 and 1860? So that's a big range, but specifically New York City.
They were looking for birth and
birth and marriage records.
Marriage. Okay. Well, there were more death records available earlier on than the birth and the marriage records. Okay. And again, what I'm going to concentrate on is those civil records created by the city, by the health department and all. A few marriages started being recorded in the 1820s, but not all that many. Same thing, some of the births started to be recorded in 1840s. But again, it was fairly sparse in those early years.
Yeah.
And certificates didn't come into New York City till 1866. So they were recorded in ledgers, not on certificates. So therefore, they're not in every index. So Family Search is probably the best index for those early years to start with.
Okay, great. So our next question is a little more general, I guess sort of more of a historical question, but so this person has an Irish ancestor that came to New York in 1765, and they're wondering just in general, why were the Irish coming to New York then? Could it have been as a British soldier serving in the British military? Any ideas on the origins of that person?
I mean,
Yeah.
it could be a number of reasons. We always think, work is primary, is
Yep.
trying to get into a city and move into a place that's a bit more active.
Yep.
We have to know probably more about the person and their circumstance, but I would say military is always an option, though it's also that they were just looking for a city that was bustling and
Yep.
looking to be more active.
Yeah, and I do know, of course, a lot would depend on the family, but I do know as well that and if it was a big family, maybe the eldest son inherits the land, and then the other sons need to find something to do, and especially in Ireland, joining the British military was almost like the another option for people.
Right.
So definitely, it probably would be tough at that time, considering the movement was to a colony and not sort of an international immigration, to find records and,
Technically a
Yeah.
migration
Yep.
rather than an
Yep.
immigration,
Yep, right.
because
Yep.
you're migrating between two parts of the country, even though they're across the ocean.
Yep. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay, so we have actually reached the end of our questions, and we're just about out of time. So thanks to everybody for joining us. I know we do have a year-end campaign going for some donations. So Josh, would you like to talk about what people can do to support us? And
Absolutely. So here's the time this comes
Yes.
at the end of anybody's year. So December 31st is the last day to make a charitable donation that can be deducted on your taxes this year. The NYGMB, we've been very, very busy this year between different events, the website. We've done the advocacy for New York City vital records and births and death records. All of those activities are possible because of your support. Your membership in the organization covers a small percentage of the overall operating costs for the organization. And so to support Fred and Sue and I and other members of the team and everything that we do, we ask for your support at this time of the year. And your support actually does real things. So on Giving Tuesday, which we named Giving Tools Day, we were able to raise almost $4,000. And we've already ordered new cameras so we can increase digitization efforts. We've been able to set our webinars up for next year, all because of the support that you gave us that day. So we ask you to be as generous as you are comfortable being this year and help us out. You can go to newyorkfamilyhistory.org/donate and make a contribution today.
And also, while you're on the website, go look at the events calendar. We've got that whole week of webinars coming up in January,
Yes,
January 8th through 12th.
And that's a free week to you as part of our celebrating NYGMB week.
yeah, we give you 1 week to recover from the holidays, and then it's right back
and
into
go
it.
right back to it.
And yeah, it's gonna be great. We have 6 in the span of 5 days, which is sort of unprecedented for us.
It's gonna be fun.
But we're really excited. We have a lot of great topics, a lot of great speakers. So check out our website, which has a list, and you can sign up. And as Sue mentioned, it's free to listen in live, and recordings, of course, will be available for members. So yeah, thank you for joining us, and we will see you again in 2018.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.